Hello, and welcome to Stephoodle. I am, digitally, Steph. Do you ever have a project that just becomes so overwhelming that you need to shelve it for a little while? A little over a year ago, I was supposed to take part in a vocaloid collab, but things kept going wrong and I got really stressed and ultimately had to drop out. Well, a few months ago, my friend Knox from Rainstorm Creations reached out because they had to drop out of the same collab and wondered if we could join forces and finally finish those dolls. And of course, I said yes. I'll be making Kasane Teto, who is not actually a vocaloid, but I'll explain later. The footage you'll be seeing will be a mix of things I filmed last year and this year. You'll be able to spot the difference because I flipped my cutting mat over from the pink side to the purple side in between. For now, let's zoom back to the summer of 2024. I'll be using this Bo Peep head on this made-to-move Barbie body. I'll start with her clothing as it's the most complicated part besides her hair. First, I iron on the music staff designs on most of the pieces for her skirt and jacket, and then I'll start putting the skirt together. These are all the pieces for the top layer of her skirt. I'll start by adding the red pieces to their corresponding gray ones. Now I can attach the two front pieces at the center seam. To make fake zippers, I took a scrap of a zipper I had in my stash, colored it with a chrome marker, and pressed it onto some faux leather. And they look pretty good! Then I sew them onto the center pieces and then add the next two skirt panels. I attach these little triangle rings before adding the final panels. Next, I hem the bottom of the skirt. I also add a grommet where I'll be attaching her red and gray belt later. Then I make the underskirt out of black fabric, adding a ruffle, and then attaching it to the top layer at the waist. I sewed on teeny tiny zipper pulls to the top and bottom of both fake zippers. For her black belts, I used some 3D fabric paint to add the silver parts on the ends of some ribbon and attach them to the front of the skirt. Then I sew up the back seam of the skirt and add a snap closure. Also at some point I added a little clasp to the grommet, but I can't find the footage of me doing it, so there we are. Now I can cut the black ribbons down to size and sew them onto the triangle rings I added earlier. For the red and gray belt, I ironed a strip of red diamonds onto some of the same gray fabric I used for her skirt and jacket. Then I trim it down to size and use hem tape to press it into shape. I cut a small piece of holographic fabric to use for the little end cap. I glue it on the back side of the belt, then sew it onto the clasp, before trimming it down and gluing the rest in place. Once dry, I trim the belt down to size and sew it into the underskirt. And that's the skirt done. Now for the jacket. I didn't have buttons in the right color, so I painted them gold and sealed them with gloss varnish. First, I'll sew the cuffs to the sleeves, and then I'll hem the cuffs. I made the little sleeve straps out of ribbon, and I used hem tape to attach them to the cuffs. Next, I sew on the buttons. Now to work on the sleeve cape thingies. I used hem tape to iron on the central ribbon on the two larger pieces, and then I added the ribbon trim to all three pieces, kind of like a bias binding. I attached the sleeve capes to the sleeves before sewing them up and flipping them right side out, and then set them aside for now. I sew the two back pieces of the bodice together at the center seam. Then I can attach the front pieces at the shoulders. I iron on and paint the teeny badge on her collar before sewing it to the bodice. I add more ribbon trim to the center fronts and around the collar in the same way I did for the sleeve capes. I sew up the side seams of the bodice, adding another little triangle ring. Then I hem the bottom of the bodice. I also add her gold epaulettes, but I won't sew them down completely until I add the straps to the front. I added a Velcro closure as snaps would have been too bulky. Next I sew on the buttons, and now I can sew in the sleeves. I'll use this black ribbon and some silver buckles to make the straps, and I'll sew down the gold epaulettes while I'm at it. The longer strap gets tucked through the little clasp and then velcros around the triangle ring. And that's the jacket finished. I painted some Barbie boots black, then picked out the eyelets with my chrome marker before painting the laces white. I sealed them with some matte Mod Podge. I took some of the same red fabric I used for her skirt and made fake socks, which I glued just inside the top of the boots. I made the little straps on the back of her boots with some craft foam and 3D paint. Then I painted the straps red and the little buttons black, before giving them one last coat of Mod Podge. Then I glued them onto the boots. Now they're done too. So, This was the face-up I gave her last year, and I don't like it. I was trying a different sealant, and it was awful to work with, and it didn't hold up well, as you can see a bit of her blushing flaked off. So I'm stripping her back down and starting again with old reliable Mr. Super Clear. While I work on her new face-up, I'll give a brief history / explanation of Teto and why I chose her. I love interesting bits of internet lore, and that's how I found out about Teto. But first, what is a vocaloid? Vocaloid is a music software that, in the most reductive way I can describe it, is like musical text-to-speech. You can license voice banks and use those to create songs by inputting lyrics and a melody. Many of the voice banks have mascot characters called vocaloids, the most famous of which is the queen, Hatsune Miku. Even if you weren't familiar with Vocaloid music, you've probably seen this turquoise twin-tailed gremlin around the internet in some form or another over the last decade or so. As I said earlier, Teto is not a Vocaloid. She was originally created as an April Fool's joke in 2008 on the Japanese text board 2channel, but she became so popular that an actual voice bank was created in Utau, which is a similar program to Vocaloid but for fan-made work, using the voice of Oyamano Mayo, who had provided a voice line for the original joke announcement. And in 2023, on the 15th anniversary of the original hoax, Teto was announced to be joining the official lineup of mascot voice banks for Synthesizer V, which is a newer Vocaloid-like software, with Oyamano Mayo returning to provide the voice data. And with that, Teto received a redesign to look more like her own character. I'll link a video by the VTuber Yam Albat, which goes into a bit more depth about the whole thing in the video description, as well as Sarah Spaceman's video making her Teto cosplay, which was what made me want to even attempt this doll in the first place. Some fun facts about Teto that I love are that she's 31, while most Vocaloid characters are in their teens. She loves French bread, and she's sad if someone has bread and will not share it with her. I mean, I would be sad too. I love bread. I love how this new face-up turned out so much better. Now I can reattach her head and finally tackle what I was dreading most. Her hair. Thankfully, I made a bunch of yarn wefts before I gave up last year. Thanks, past me. I start by gluing on her fringe, and then working on one ponytail section at a time. To help me form her famous drill curls, I'll make some base shapes out of felt. I got the idea while making Neon's hat in my last video. I sewed the little cones onto the base of the ponytails. Then, working in sections, I spray a bit of hairspray on my hands, work it into the section, twist it, then wrap it around the cone and clip it in place. I let each section dry before moving on to the next. This was some real trust the process, but it worked! Now I just need to cut and style her fringe. And here she is! I also glued on some small pieces of fabric to simulate the ribbon in her curl, and made a little bow and attached it with a pin. So we have our doll, her jacket, her skirt, and her boots. All that's left to do is get her dressed and she's done. I cannot tell you how happy I am that this project is finally done. I know I've been staring at her for far too long, so all I can see is the imperfections and how I do things different. But my mantra while finishing her has been, done is better than perfect. And that really helped. I will say I am happy I was able to get her drill curls to look pretty good in the end, because that's what I was stressing over the most. I did so many tests of different ways to do it. What do you think of my take on Teto? Do you have a favorite Vocaloid character, or Utau, or whatever? Or a favorite song? This is where I have to admit I only know a handful of songs. I'm such a fake fan. But I love Teto's origin story so much. So also, if you have a favorite bit of niche internet lore, please also tell me in the comments. Please head over to Rainstorm Creations and see the absolutely stunning strawberry Miku that Nox made. Like, all of the details. Ah, she's so cute! And it's been so fun working with them. We really kept hyping each other up throughout the whole process. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and click the bell icon and turn on all notifications so you'll know whenever I post a new video. These are all my socials, which will be linked down below. I'm most active on Instagram. A massive thank you to the Big Kapowski for supporting me over on Ko-fi. And if you really like what I do, and you want to buy me a coffee or help me afford more supplies, you can find a link to my Ko-fi tip jar in the description down below, or you can click the super thanks button right below this video. And until next time, bye!